Imagine an entire town, wealthy, thriving, and black-owned, wiped off the map in a single night. It really happened. In 1921, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, people called it Black Wall Street. Then a mob burned it to the ground, killed as many as 300 people, and for 50 years, America acted as if it had never happened. This is the story they left out of your history books. It began in 1906. An entrepreneur named O.W. Gurley bought a stretch of land in Tulsa and sold it only to black families. They named the district Greenwood, and the people who built it were, in many cases, just one single generation removed from slavery. And what they built was extraordinary. Greenwood became one of the most prosperous black communities in the entire United States. It had its own banks, hotels, grocery stores, and restaurants, its own doctors, lawyers, and dentists, 2 newspapers, a hospital, and the celebrated Dreamland Theater. There was a saying about Greenwood: a single dollar earned there would circulate within the community for months, passing through dozens of black-owned businesses before it ever left the neighborhood. In a country built to hold them back, they had built an entire economy of their own. But Greenwood's success did not exist in a vacuum. It sat inside a state ruled by Jim Crow segregation and a violently resurgent Ku Klux Klan. To many of their white neighbors, a thriving black community was not a point of pride. It was a threat, and that resentment was a fire, waiting for a spark. That spark came on May 30th, 1921. A 19-year-old black shoe shiner named Dick Rowland stepped into an elevator operated by a young white woman, Sarah Page. What truly happened inside, no one knows for certain. She cried out. He ran, but by the next morning, Rowland had been arrested, and a local white newspaper was practically calling for him to be lynched. By evening, a white mob had gathered outside the courthouse, demanding the police hand Rowland over. To protect him, a group of black men, many of them veterans who had just fought for America in the First World War, arrived, armed. There was a confrontation. A single shot was fired, and in an instant, the city erupted into violence. Through the night of May 31st into June 1st, thousands of white rioters poured across the railroad tracks and into Greenwood. And this was no random mob. Many of them had been deputized by city officials, handed badges, and handed guns. What followed was systematic destruction. They looted the homes, then set them ablaze. Businesses, churches, the school, the hospital, all burned. Survivors described aircraft flying overhead, dropping burning turpentine onto the rooftops. 35 city blocks were turned into a sea of fire and ash. In a matter of hours, Black Wall Street, 15 years of dreams, labor, and triumph, simply ceased to exist. When the sun rose, Greenwood was gone. The human cost was staggering. As many as 300 people were killed, though the true number may never be known, because many were buried in unmarked mass graves. More than 1,200 homes were destroyed, and roughly 10,000 black residents were left homeless overnight, many rounded up and held in internment camps across the city. But the most disturbing part of this story is not the fire. It's what came after, because somehow an entire massacre, a community of thousands destroyed in a single night, was made to disappear. Not a single person was ever convicted for the destruction of Greenwood. The insurance companies refused to pay the black families' claims, dismissing it all as a riot. Police records and official documents quietly vanished, and newspapers went back and removed the story from their own archives. For 50 years, it was not taught in Oklahoma's schools. It was not in the textbooks. Survivors learned that it was safer to stay silent. An entire generation grew up in Tulsa, never knowing that their own city had once burned a thriving neighborhood to the ground. It was not until the 1990s and 2000 that historians and a state commission finally forced the truth back into the light. They began searching for the very mass graves, that the city had denied existed for decades. And in 2021, on the 100th anniversary, something remarkable happened. 3 survivors of the massacre, all of them over 100 years old, including a woman named Viola Fletcher, testified before the United States Congress. They had been small children when they watched their world burn, and a century later, they were still waiting for justice. Excavations finally began uncovering the unmarked graves the city had hidden for 100 years, and slowly, the nation began to say the name out loud again. Greenwood. Black Wall Street was no longer a secret, but Greenwood's story is not only about what was destroyed, it is about what was built. It stands as undeniable proof of what a community can achieve, even against impossible odds, and it remains a warning of just how easily history can be erased when no one is left to tell it. The people of Greenwood built a dream out of almost nothing and watched it burn in a single night. And then they watched the world choose to forget. We remember it now so that it can never be erased again. This is Untold America. Subscribe, and next time, the story of the black lawman who arrested over 3,000 outlaws in the Wild West.